We are live.
Well, hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside Webinar. We're thrilled to be with all of you this afternoon. I'd like to thank Cloudflare for being our sponsor today. And our topic is a modern shift, merging SASE, we had to ask about that, SASE and Zero Trust is our topic today. So let's just cover a couple quick things on our agenda and our housekeeping. First, we're going to kick things off with our panelist introductions, and then we'll hear a little bit from Cloudflare and what they do and how they do it. We'll jump into our panel discussions, and then at 2:35, we'll have our Q&A. I remind everybody to use the Q&A chat window and not the actual chat window to share your questions as they arise for you. We will answer them as best as we can at 2:35. And then we'll be off there at 2:45. For those that are in need of a CPE credit, we kindly ask that you complete the survey at the end of our session today, and there will be a space to include your CPE number. By tomorrow, you'll receive your CPE information via an email so that you can make your deposit into your accounts. You will need to stay on for the webinar in its entirety to get that CPE credit and to get that email tomorrow morning. Well, let's jump into our panelist introductions. We've got a great group of folks here today, some of my very favorites in the industry. So Hayden, it's been a long time. It's great to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm currently past year and a half, I've been with Inspire Brands, so multi-brand company, large integration effort. It's kind of what I'm used to from the past, so it's an interesting challenge. And before that, I had stints in healthcare and finance and large retail, mostly in the Southeast areas. So glad to be here, share and learn from others.
Well, thank you very much. And Barry, good to see you today. Would you share a little bit about yourself?
Good to see you, Marci. So I'm Barry Suskin. I work for FINRA. We regulate the securities industry. We have a very large footprint in AWS. I've been working for the company for just over 21 years. So I've been here for quite a long time and I'm doing a variety of topics. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. And Dan, nice to have you here today with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us a little bit about Cloudflare.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you all for attending and thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion. So my job at Cloudflare is basically I sit at the intersection of our product management, our engineering teams, our marketing teams, and our customers, and help them and their teams learn about our newer solutions, how to adopt them, where the business value is in these solutions, and then hopefully if they choose to adopt them, make them successful in doing so. So what that means in practice is essentially I manage a team that is out in the field working both from a business perspective and from a technical perspective with customers to introduce them to our solutions, help them adopt them, like I said, and hopefully make them happy over time. A little bit about Cloudflare. I've been at Cloudflare for about 5 years. We're a 10-year-old company, going on 11 years here, coming up pretty soon. Cloudflare at its core, what we do is we run the world's largest Anycast network. So we run a network that's has 200 points of presence across the globe, 67 terabits of capacity of throughput on the network. And on top of that network, we deliver a variety of services that we kind of break down into 3 buckets. One is application services, and this is what we're most well known for. When we went public 18 months ago or 20 months ago, I think we're most well known for our DNS services, our DDoS services, our content delivery services, WAF, and things like that, things that are more focused on the application. What we've been doing for the last several years is kind of bolting on building, I should say, actually new areas of services for our end customers. So we've begun building out more services and more products and more features in the networking as a service space and also the zero trust space. And that's where I spend a lot of my time. So these ideas of zero trust and SASE are usually what I end up talking to customers the most about. It is an area that we're very excited about helping customers adopt at Cloudflare. So I thank you all for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do, for us to join, and really looking forward to a discussion here. So Marci, thank you very much, and back to you to kind of get us kicked off.
Thank you, Dan. And again, thank you to Cloudflare for being our sponsor today. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our first topic, which is the next steps for remote work security. We have had quite the last 16, 17 months, and it's hard to believe that we're still partially on Zoom, but many of us are starting to make our way back into the offices and actually developing a type of hybrid work environments. But the challenge along the way is around keeping our employees connected and secure for the long haul. And we've really seen some vulnerabilities and openings as we've had to quickly pivot from the in-person workplace now to the remote workplace and now back to the hybrid realm. We're seeing vulnerabilities, limitations, and some of the legacy technologies are really starting to show their inabilities to really kind of adapt to this new world that we're going. So a lot of people are thinking about zero trust out there as a platform, and really how it is allowing users to connect and streamline for administrators by allowing the policies to be managed from one dashboard and allow for remote working. So essentially, it doesn't matter where you're working. You could be in the office one day, at an airport the next day, at Starbucks the next, but ultimately you're still coming into the corporate network and are safe and secure when you're using the applications and the technologies via any type of device. So with that said, I'm going to jump into our first questions here. This question is actually for Dan. So Dan, I know you're coming in from the Cloudflare perspective here. So you're working with a lot of different customers out there and seeing lots of different environments. So tell us a little bit about what you're kind of seeing out there from a business and security perspective. What are some of these problems that are sort of arising as we're kind of being in this hybrid remote workforce now coming back? And how can you address that, overall, as we're kind of making this major change in how we work, but still needing to be secure?
Yeah, thanks for that. The way that I kind of think about it is you got to kind of divorce some of the marketing materials from like what is actually happening, because when remote work happened and SASE came out, every company, and Cloudflare has done this as well, we've kind of piled into this space, and there's white papers upon white papers and marketing materials upon marketing materials. I think about what has fundamentally changed for businesses and for customers. And regardless of the industry, the size, whatever it may be, the trend that was happening at customers was the internet, the public internet was becoming more critical to their business. So whether it be transactions with customers, partnerships, whatever it may be, reliance on the internet was becoming a bigger thing. And what COVID did was essentially, boom, just accelerate that forward for all the reasons that Marci described. And then what we saw in our business, and I think this has been kind of true across the industry, is folks that were solving kind of problems, if you want to say that, around the internet being as big as it is, tended to pile in and buy what they were already doing to kind of deal with the surge of remote work. So if you were buying a zero trust solution and maybe you had 50% seat adoption, you were pushing that to 100 really quickly. If you were using VPNs, you were ramping up VPN concentrators just to kind of get you through the surge, so to say. Now, as Marci said, as we've kind of leveled off, it feels like, or we have some kind of sense, at least here in the US, of what remote work is going to look like. I now kind of see what I describe as kind of the great sorting out happening, which is COVID just kind of pulsed the system and moved us ahead of where we were already going. And customers still recognize that, if they ramped up VPN concentrators, for example, they still have too much lateral movement inside their organization. So we've got to solve that. There's performance issues now because everyone went home. So now backhauling people through single locations are still a problem. So I kind of think of it as, the public internet for businesses, which has always been very scary, is kind of here to stay, given where we are. And kind of the sorting out that's happening now is kind of, how do I deal with that? And how do I deal with the security challenges, whether it be from SaaS applications, the cloud, or even exposing internal applications to the public internet? How do I deal with that? And that's where we spend a lot of time talking to customers about that. So I hope that's helpful, and welcome any thoughts or follow-ups or anything like that as well.
Absolutely. So this hyper acceleration forced us to because of COVID, forced us into a lot of cloud environments. I think a lot of folks out there probably had some plans on the books, but literally realizing that this was the best way to fast track and keep us productive and secure as we had to work from home. Hayden, you're one of the world-class CISOs out there. How are you dealing with the rise of the cloud, and how has your security posture changed with more assets, data, and users going off premises? And are you even back in the office for thinking about it?
It's funny, I'll go backwards. So yes, a lot of us are back in the office. In fact, yesterday I got in line for food and I had to wait like 45 minutes. So people are piling back in for sure, which is good. But we do have a pretty strong remote workforce as well, especially with the multiple brands that we have. There's a different headquarters kind of for each brand, at least today. So we're spread out a good bit and a lot of work from home. You know, with us, it was scary at first. It was, you know, I heard stories of people, their VPN concentrators go down or whatever. We were better prepared than we thought. We had not gone down the zero trust route, but I think everyone started to figure out that, hey, I mostly use Office 365 and Salesforce all day and a couple other things, and they found that they didn't really need a VPN. So we saw a spike in VPN usage followed by a lot lower when people figured that out. And then we quickly started, fortunately had a lot of foundational items in place with some federated identity platforms and things like that we could quickly secure some of the traditional things that we didn't have multi-factor authentication on that we're able to jump on really quick. So believe it or not, it actually accelerated the zero trust journey for us. And so it's been outstanding.
Well, excellent. It sounds like you guys made the transition well, and glad to hear that you're back in the office. I know I appreciate you it is a double-edged sword, to your point, waiting in line for your lunch for 45 minutes and sitting in traffic now. And before you were like, where is everybody? And now you're like, well, it's a good thing that we see it all, but and probably another month we'll be really annoyed by it.
Sure. Exactly.
Barry, you are totally a threat detection and expert at your company. So I wanted to ask you this question. What are you doing to solve the vulnerabilities that appear due to the quick remote working fixes that we've had to experience with the pandemic? And have you embraced the zero trust framework? If so, tell us a little bit about it and tell us why not if you don't.
Yeah, we sort of had embraced, I guess, a lot of the tenets of zero trust long before this, looking at preventing workstations from doing workstation communications. We don't want transient communications. Workstations are supposed to talk to applications and services and not each other. So we'd already done a lot to lock down the machines. We do have a fairly decent workforce that goes out on assignment, the examiners that go out to member firms and do things. So we've always had VPN in mind and always had it locked down. So things like SASE services and O365 that we've started to use, you were required to authenticate through our network. So you couldn't get there without VPN, and that protected us a lot from data exfiltration risks that I've talked to other people in the industry, and they see that now as a concern where they allowed people to log in from anywhere to O365 and didn't set up proper conditional access controls. So you could log in, download attachments onto your personal machines or even onto your corporate machine. And then if you're not on VPN, you could use other services to send them other places. So we've always had kind of a mindset to keep things locked down. But looking at that, this whole backhauling the traffic through the network just doesn't make any sense. We did right size our VPN concentrators, and things like Zoom, we split tunnels. So the audio and visual components go outside the tunnel and go directly to Zoom because they really don't need to be secured. You can't really see what's going on in that anyway. So we've split tunneled that, but all the other traffic still goes into the data center and then back out to either AWS or O365. So now we're looking at how do we solve that problem? And that's where a SASE kind of a solution comes in.
Well, it's a perfect segue, actually, Barry, to our next topic, is really finding this common ground between the zero trust and SASE out there. Because in adopting a zero trust type of strategy, some enterprises are actually getting started with the Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE is what SASE actually stands for, not a SASE person. But in leaning heavily on that security or zero trust security model, it's really still a cloud-based security model that's combining the software elements that you talked about, actually both Hayden and Barry talked about, but doing so in a wide area networking with a core network security services. So at the end of the day, the zero trust model really allows for policies to be there as well as for network level threat protection. So there's a lot of benefits to having it. So let me ask my first question here to Hayden. What is SASE to you? Because, you know, we're still learning about this concept, and what kinds of implementations are you kind of seeing out there related to the pandemic? You know, and is there any challenges or pitfalls that we should be thinking about since we're kind of chartering once we get into some new territory?
Yeah, so yeah, I think, so what does it mean to me? I think it was the marketing name SASE was defined prior to me knowing what it was. And I'm still constantly learning, but I find that to me, they are converged. I won't say they're one and the same, but I think they all go together with a zero trust, strategy. And and you really gotta examine kind of user traffic. What's normal traffic behavior? Do you have cloud-based tools? Like even in the security world, standing, from my seat, switching from data center antivirus to cloud-based antivirus as an example, or a data center patching tool that lives in my four walls to a patching solution that's in the cloud. That way all my users can always be connected. Because I think one of the biggest problems in switching over is, I always hate this, like if we're doing new software deployments or a quick patch, it's like, well, we got to wait on them to VPN before we can apply the patch. Well, that's a dead end strategy, telling everybody they got a VPN in, right? So it's really, examining all those things, and then, putting together your strategy of how you want this thing to look, and, and embrace the two, whether you think of them separate or together. So to me, they converge really fast as soon as you start delving into them. But yeah, that's essentially kind of the way we look at things.
Well, I think there's a lot of common sense there when you kind of approach it and think about it from the perspective of, we know that the people are supposed to be there, but they're going to be in different places. So kind of figuring out from an access control perspective through the application makes just a world of sense versus the actual location of the individual. So Barry, let me sort of ask you a question. What do you think that SASE strategy really involves as well? And does it truly, you think, maybe protect the applications as we're sort of talking about here, and the infrastructure? I mean, secure the data? Does it help with filtering the traffic? Because you kind of designed this really awesome way that you took the Zoom traffic out, because I'm sure it was eating up a lot of your bandwidth inside your VPN, even though you were right sizing your VPN. But this sounds a lot better.
Yeah, and it does involve all of the above. So it's going to involve filtering traffic. So people that are going out surfing on the internet, that becomes where your content filtering. And now you can inspect the traffic. It also protects applications. So now you can decide based on where a person's location is, well, and what device they're using. Am I going to let him into this application? And if I do, am I going to let him see certain components, do downloads, attachments? And it gives you a lot more fine-grained controls into those areas. And it also provides a place to protect you from a malware perspective as well, because now things are getting filtered through something that there's better chance you're going to catch someone going to a site that turns out to be malicious and stopping any kind of a download that could get onto somebody's workstation.
Well, Dan, from your perspective, is this a complementary or an alternative, or SASE, I should say, a complementary, or is it standalone, or should it be an alternative to zero trust? So is it enhancing it or strengthening your zero trust program, or can you just do one or the other, or should we be looking at both?
I agree with T.E.N, and I think it's complementary, and here's why. Is the idea of zero trust was kind of bubbling for a while, starting back with Google and Beyond Corp, and they really kind of invented this idea and then put it out into the world. And I thought Hayden did a good job of describing, people were down a certain path with zero trust. And then I think if we go back to what I mentioned about the pandemic, it kind of put this accelerant on it. And that accelerant is really, getting people again to the internet, which again is kind of what I view SASE about, right? It's kind of running your WAN up in the cloud. So this concept of your edge kind of becomes your new WAN. And when you put that together with zero trust, they kind of fit hand in glove. So I view as zero trust as an element of SASE. SASE just being like an architecture model that people aspire to. Zero trust is something that you can actually, you can actually enforce and really kind of apply policy against, so to say. Like SASE is kind of the big idea up here. And I think of, zero trust as, hey, how do we actually implement this thing? And I think, again, they go hand in glove and are very complementary of each other.
So let's just sort of shift gears a little bit and sort of talk about some considerations for your SASE setup if you're going down that path. Adopting SASE along with zero trust platform, because I think that's what we're all concluding here is the strong recommendation. It seems like a lot, can be intimidating, but I don't really think it has to be overall, even though it is a new concept for many of us. I think we all can agree that evaluating your network traffic to see where your users work, as you guys outlined earlier, what applications they're using, you'll find actually there's some good governance there because you don't have to worry about as many entitlements, right? Because they should be only accessing the systems that they should be accessing. And then, of course, the network and security resources that they're utilizing. So from bandwidth to other applications. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to help our security teams be even more efficient. I mean, a lot of them have been overrun with a lot of different tasks and responsibilities, but this can actually help them focus while making our environments a little bit more secure. So let's sort of jump in here and sort of talk a little bit about the business side of things. Barry, you've been with your company a long time, and I know you do a lot of this thought process as you approach looking at new technologies. So tell us how you would advise others to look at the business and the security objectives and have them align before even considering adopting SASE. And maybe tell us a little bit about what the ideal migration plan could look like, and and tell us a little bit more about your journey there.
We're starting to look at it now, and looking at it from the business side, we have basically 3 different places where applications are, stuff that's in the cloud. I mean, we have Amazon and we have O365, but we also have SaaS solutions. And then we still have applications that are still running in the data center. So some of those may be living there for possibly another 2 to 3 years, as we've already had a pretty big migration of our applications into the cloud. So when you make this kind of a transition, it's going to be a migration and not some big bang. You have to look at, well, which stuff is going to stay with a VPN? So I still have to VPN in order to get to these applications. Which ones will more easily fit into a strategy with SASE? And then SASE is a little bifurcated too, because some SaaS applications like O365 offer their own controls. So now you're in a tussle as to, well, where do you put the controls? Do you lock everything up into what the policies the SASE provides? Or do you allow it to just say, oh, okay, it's going to O365, I'll let you go there. And then it's up to O365 to decide, well, you're coming from a corporate computer, I know how it's locked down, so I can give you full access. Or you're coming from a personal device and I can't let you access these tools. So you have to look at it from a lot of different perspectives. We do have, some of the requirements we have. I mean, we're a US-based company. So the first thing we've already locked down with VPN is we don't allow people to if they just happen to take their computer and I think I'm going to travel abroad and try and log in from there, you're going to get blocked. So we take into account those kind of considerations along with people trying to anonymize their connections through some kind of a VPN. So you have to look at all of those different things. Plus you have to look at, okay, people are working from home. What tools do they need to work from home? So we do allow printing from home, because there are people that need to print and ink sign documents. And there are the people that they basically have trouble editing things online. So they have to print it out and edit it on paper. and then they can consume their comments and put them back in. So we have to make allowances for that, but you do it in a smart fashion. You have to understand where the business is and what their requirements are, and give them some of the tools they need. So we don't allow network printing from home. So if you want to print from home, you have to plug your printer into the computer, which in this day and age sounds a little archaic, but those are just some of the requirements to prevent leakage, preventing that computer that you've now taken home from now getting access to the local network at home, and perhaps providing another avenue for data leakage or malware. So it's a variety of things that you have to look at, and it has to be pretty open-minded.
Well, excellent thoughts there. So actually I'm going to shift over to Hayden. You worked with many vendors and partners over the years. I would say you probably perfected it overall. So what are you kind of looking for out there to advise others, you know, as they're going down the SASE journey, leveraging your experiences of really partnering with different companies out there to evaluate the right company and align that with your own security strategy and plan overall? Because again, we're all new to a lot of this kind of concepts. We've kind of been thrown into some of this, but taking our experiences, especially like yours, of how you've done a great job of partnering with the solution providers that have worked with you over the years to kind of take that forward and continue the path down this, the journey down this path.
Yeah, and I think to capitalize on what Barry said, I mean, you really have to know your environment, understand your environment, understand the tools, and it's not just picking. To me, it's not about picking just a zero trust vendor. Essentially, it's you got to be embedded in. You know, if you're what kind of CRM tool is the business looking at, and can those requirements actually accept something like a Cloudflare in front of it or not, right? Or can they do single sign-on? Can they do, you know, SMS, or do they federate even? So those are the kind of, so I didn't answer your question directly on a cloud vendor, or I answered more cloud vendors than I did cloud security vendors, but because you'll find the challenges with just some cloud-based tools, they're just not advanced. They're not advanced enough to, you know, be able to do single sign-on example. So we kind of have some questions that we asked that help prepare us for, can this vendor be cloud friendly, if you will? So, you know, so I think that's a good portion of it. And then just, you know, once you inventory your apps and you know, then when you're evaluating some of these vendors, and if they've worked and they've applied their, you know, reverse proxy or whatever to these technology solutions, it's kind of good to see, you know, really good to see that things can integrate together. And the worst thing biggest peeve is when I start working with a vendor, and often early stage, you kind of get it. They haven't experienced integrating with something, but I love it when they come with a list of proven vendors, like 60 plus vendors we've already integrated with, which is fantastic. So that's kind of a big check mark for me, that they've been there, done that, and they've seen some archaic technologies and they've worked with it, you know, from legacy environments. So I think that's really important. So compatibility with everything in your tool belt, basically.
So to your point on the interoperability and the compatibility, so when you're doing the implementation, you're not basically redoing or creating something out of the air is a big factor for you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I don't want to be the first guy to implement, you know, SAP with one of these vendors or something, right? I just want to make sure somebody's blazed that path before me.
As one that used to implement PeopleSoft many years ago, the amount of interfaces that we had to create, and then the training that we had. So I'm with you.
Yeah, no doubt.
Barry, you wanted to talk a little bit more about single sign-on as it relates to all this, because single sign-on is really kind of logical, especially when you are working remotely, because there's nothing more annoying to me when you have to go to this screen and then log in there, and then you go to this application and you go in there, and then you go to your phone and you want to do something over there. I mean, it should know who we are. You know what I mean?
It's a challenge. It's
yeah,
a big
and it is a
challenge.
challenge.
And
so does this solve that problem?
Yeah, on the internal side, we've solved that with all of our internal apps, and have single sign-on for the vast majority of them. We were running PeopleSoft, and that did not have single sign-on, so you did have to re-enter your own credentials, but at least it was using the same credential base. So instead of it being a single sign-on, it had like an LDAP connection, so you could still use your Active Directory credentials. In the cloud, again, the majority of our SaaS providers do use some form of single sign-on. So we have two major different constituents. One uses the Active Directory single sign-on methodology, think ADFS, and then the other one is just basically SAML based, and ADFS is SAML based anyway. So you really have a choice between the two, but it's really important to have that. And now you commented about phones, and we're looking at that as well, because we do have BYOD and it's personal phones. The personal phones are locked down to where it's an office app. On Androids, it's a work profile, so you're stuck in there. And on iPhones, we disable features like sharing. But there's a challenge. You go into a browser and now you have to log in. And because of the timeouts that are involved, if you go away or shut down the browser and come back to it in an hour, now it's going to ask you to log in again. And we've gone to very long passwords, which makes it cumbersome to enter, a 12-character, 16-character password, even if it's an English phrase on a phone. So we want to try and come up with a single sign-on method. But then when you do that, you look by the same token. Well, now I have single sign-on to all my internal apps. Well, there might be some internal apps that aren't appropriate to run on a personal device. So you have to look in that direction to see which ones you're going to allow.
So, Dan, I want to get your perspective here. I mean, we're still, you're the leader in this, carving the way for a lot of us. How do you think this, it's evolving, but how do you think where it's going to go, and what sort of, it's a little bit cliche, but what kind of cyber threats are keeping you up at night but are solved, by a SASE type of and zero trust type of model? And can it be used in a proactive manner? Because we've seen a lot of crazy going on in the last couple of months, probably already there, but they're getting more brazen and there's getting more publicity to it. So can it just really help us in some of the things that we've seen kind of come about?
Yeah, I have kind of two thoughts. The something that I think has been kind of an undercurrent of the conversation, which is really important, is this idea of SASE is this kind of huge network transformation. It's going to take time. There's a lot of work to be done there. There's a lot of different pieces there, but as you say, Marci, there's kind of threat vectors that are open today and are being exposed, right? And that you need help with. And I kind of, think back to something also that Hayden and Barry said, which is, you've got to really know your environment, and you've got to apply the right technology to the right place at the right time. I see basically no large enterprise over the course of a 90-day period embrace SASE. It's just really not possible, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. It's going to take, many large enterprises years to phase out VPNs if they ever want to. In some cases they may not want to. So these are long-running things. So the threat vector for each customer is going to be different, and I think you've got to know that as the Hayden and Barry of your organization. Clearly, they have a good grip on it. And you've got to press your vendors really hard on kind of what they do, what they integrate with, and where they don't succeed, because your threat vector may be different than another threat vector. And I like what Hayden said of like, hey, tell me who you integrate with. Like, tell me where my dark spots are, right? If you don't know that going in, no one vendor is going to magically solve the problem for you. I suspect that we'll continue to see a rise in ransomware. I suspect that we'll continue to see a rise in state kind of sponsored activity. I expect we're going to see kind of a continued rise in just silly things like DDoS attacks, right, that are way up, that are causing headaches. Like, I think all of these things will continue. The complexity will continue. Nothing is a single stroke fix to any of these. Really knowing your environment and pressing your vendors is really the place that I think most need to be, because it's just not as easy as a one-click solves all here.
Great points, Dan. Great points, all of you guys. So we've got a whole lot of questions, I think, from the audience. I think we've Got the light bulbs going off for everybody out there today. So how about we switch gears and answer some of our friends in the audience's questions. All right, we have got a great question from Todd Fitzgerald. And Todd, thanks for tuning in today. What is your definition of zero trust, and what are the top 5 things that a company can implement in order to become zero trusty? Is that a SASE zero trusty or just a zero trusty? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'm happy to.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, the basic definition that I have is that you treat everyone, whether they are inside your company or outside your company, as the same. So there's no difference in the level of trust that you provide an employee per se over someone from outside the network who is kind of accessing your systems. In terms of use cases, or what are the top 5 things that companies kind of knock off, is the way that I think about it. A lot of what we see are have to do with direct internet breakout and kind of edge cases around VPNs where there's a lot of pain today. So some that I'll kind of list off are contractors and mergers and acquisitions are 2 big ones. So if you've got a lot of people outside your environment today, and obviously that number's gone up with remote work, and you've got people on multiple identity providers, all that kind of stuff, being able to use a zero trust solution to make remote work, make mergers and acquisitions, kind of bringing internal environments together, is definitely top one. Another big one is visibility, and getting a tool in place that allows you to get visibility over what people are using. With kind of the scatter of people using different tools in different places and VPNs here and things like that, companies lose visibility, and kind of being able to source that through a single pane of glass gives you the visibility. So you might not even apply any security policies at first. You might just get visibility. The other big one is, I think, as we go back to work, the idea, and this kind of goes more around the direct internet breakout, is kind of the idea, and this is where I think SASE and zero trust kind of merge or fit each other hand in glove. We're seeing a lot of customers go back to the office or schedule back to the office with kind of this thin branch mentality, where they want to treat the user in the office as basically a remote worker when they go back to the office. So they're going to put a very simple piece of routing gear in an office and pump it over to a service like a Cloudflare or others to kind of do the internet breakout and do the policies and things like that. So that's 3 that I listed. I think that was pretty long. There's a host of more, but I don't want to hog all the time.
No, that's perfect. So let me jump in the next question from Frank Iglesias. When you say lockdown, do you mean the IT folks who provide support to the various workstations? Does Hayden or Barry want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, I think the lockdown piece, I'll try. To me, success looks like no one ever having to VPN in, right? So today you have your VPN logon statistics, that number should plummet, right? So to me, that's what that means, is not having anybody ever touch the internal network, doing an internal vulnerability scan of your offices and data centers and not seeing one laptop. That's success to me, and lockdown, if you will. Now, one area, I mean, we're beginning in this journey as well. I'm not trying to paint a picture we're complete and perfect by any stretch, but as we tackle the outside and prevent people, or reducing the need for people to VPN in, being able to switch that internally, like Dan was saying, to where whether you're in the office or at home, you look the same to me, meaning walled off, right? Is the ideal scenario. So that's lockdown to me.
See, for me,
go ahead, Barry. Go ahead,
yeah,
Barry.
it adds to that. So lockdown means that you've done what you need to on the workstation so that it's trustworthy. So you don't allow the workstation to just have open access to anything. It's locked down. So what it's talking to are your applications, or what you've allowed it to be trusted to talk to. And the workstation itself gains its trust from the fact that it's a member of the internal group. It's a member of Active Directory. The user is a member of Active Directory, and you can determine these things. So this is a corporate machine. It's at this patch level. It's encrypted, and it has these rules on it to allow it to reach what it needs to. IT services still can get into the machine to do what they need to, but going outbound is really more what it's about and how you keep it, keep it safe regardless of where it is.
So we have a question from Ed Harris. What level of SASE adoption are you seeing out there? So are you seeing a lot of it, Dan? Maybe it's a good question for you since you have this 30,000 foot viewpoint for it.
Yeah, the funny thing about that question, to me, it's a great question, is SASE, if you kind of zoom all the way out on it and you take kind of the analyst point of view, right, they threw a bunch of stuff into the SASE bucket. So you could say that everyone's adopting SASE because these technologies are kind of out there to one degree or the other. I think what I see consistently across large enterprises globally, so Global 2K, Fortune 100, there is basically in every organization that I speak to, a conversation about zero trust and or SASE happening. To the degree that it is adopted, I've learned is really driven by, are there specific pain points that the customer can solve today that puts them on a path towards a SASE model? So some of the things that Hayden described around a VPN and kind of everyone looking the same, that's a big place where we see people getting started. I would say of the companies that I talk to, most companies have kind of picked off a zero trust or a SASE use case around that. So it's a very active conversation. I also don't view this as something that it doesn't have like a clear start and a clear finish line, if that makes sense. Like this is going to be a very evolving space. And I think it's easy to get lost in the whole big concept of SASE, whereas hey, if you're on a path to do what Hayden described and kind of retire VPN, that is certainly within the framework of SASE. And there's probably going to be 10 steps on that journey. And I think many companies have begun that journey in some way. There's actually, the other thing I'll say, because there's another question I saw as I was poking through here. Someone asked a question about how do you get the networking teams and the security teams to work together? That's probably the biggest challenge that I see, honestly, in organizations, is because SASE hits on these two areas of an organization. There is kind of naturally some conflict and some politics, honestly, a little bit between those two areas. I think it was Jeff Collins asked this question. I think the way that I've seen companies approach it, maybe the advice that I would give is said that way is, kind of have a set list of requirements that both groups are working off of. I think where this stuff bogs down is people tend to kind of come at SASE from all these different angles. Pick your counterpart in the networking team or pick your counterpart in the SASE team and say, hey, what are we actually trying to accomplish as a business? What are our business objectives? And if you have those and you can bring those to a vendor, I found that the best vendors can kind of guide you across both the networking and the security side, and you're spending less time kind of politicking internally, so to say. So I think it's really just kind of finding a good partner, building your bridge between the groups and being very tight on your requirements. And maybe if you need to go learn from vendors, admitting to each other, hey, we're just going to go learn and kind of go in eyes wide open. Because that is definitely a place where we see some conflict. So I just wanted to add that because I thought it was a very natural follow on.
Dan, this is a huge point that I thought was fantastic. So if you're a security person out there, security leader, security engineer, whatever, we made 2 super fast purchases in the past few months to support our zero trust journey. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know who wanted to buy it fast enough, the security team or the network team. I mean, they were pushing the sourcing, our sourcing group and legal just as hard as I was, and it was amazing. That's never happened. I didn't have to convince them. They were pushing for it too. So it really is a reach across the aisle type technology that, and think of the user experience. So you're doing something for security that's making the user experience 1,000 times better. You're making your network guys happy and your security guys are ecstatic. Like, name some other technology that's going to do that for you. So
it probably hasn't been around since like some of the intrusion detection solutions from years past that could actually do some load balancing and network traffic management along the way. But I would concur with you. There hasn't been anything like that. They were joining forces and really kind of pushing out there, but it's just so logical at the end of the day for both teams to even probably share the expenditure, and could you go through faster through the procurement process. we have just one more minute on the air. So I just want to say thank you to Cloudflare, and thank you Hayden and Dan and Barry for this awesome conversation. Clearly everyone has got a lot of questions out there. So the Cloudflare folks are going to be back in touch with you if we didn't get to answer your question today. We have, I mean, this was fascinating. I learned a lot today, and I really appreciate all the commentary. This is going to be the next new journey and a lot of fun for all of us. Want to encourage all of you to join us on still our digital programs. We are going to be making a pivot to some in-person later this summer. I'm really excited about that. So you'll be coming to see us in a limited basis and for some ISE private dinners. But we do have some great webinars coming up. On June 16th, I would like to invite everybody to this because personal preference versus corporate policy as we turn to in-person events and meetings. We're going to have a great discussion kind of with some security executives and a couple solution providers to have that conversation, how we can return to normal in a safe manner and we can be back in person. So I encourage all of you to join us. And then we're going to have our ISE National Summit on August 17th. So we look forward to having all of you join us. That is digital, but like I said, we're going to be introducing some in-person programs, and we still have certainly our ISE Cocktails and Conversation, other ISE Fireside Webinars, and 10 Tech Talks is also starting up. So join us for some of those. We've heard from a lot of the security executives that they wanted something awesome for their team out there. Well, enjoy. CISOs, executives, and team members are all invited to come to our 10 Tech Talks. So I'm really excited about those starting up next week. So anyway, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Hayden. And thank you, Barry. And thank you, Cloudflare, for joining us today. And thank you all of you at home or maybe at back of the office for joining us for our ISE Fireside webinar. Have a great afternoon. Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you very much.